Well, Jim, it appears we have the fantastic Bobby Fulton on the line right now.
Direct from not too far north of right here where I am right now, up in Chillicothe, Ohio. And that means something only to me and Bobby.
That's right.
Ladies and gentlemen, I've said it many times, give the people what they want to see, and they will come out for it. And that's why Bobby Fulton's last match should draw an all-time record-breaking crowd for the city of Circleville, Ohio, on Saturday, May 26th. There's a fan fest beforehand with all kinds of stars. There is a star-studded lineup of wrestling that night, but it is to honor the retirement of fantastic Bobby Fulton. And Bobby, thank you for being on the show, and thank you for having me be on your show.
I'll tell you what, Jimmy, I am so excited about this. But listen, I don't know how long I got to talk. I didn't tell you the reason why you thought I was in airplane hangars. I'm standing out here at this Goodwill. And what happened is I tried to bring a box spring. Now listen, and they won't even let me bring it. Now listen to me. I've got a box spring, and I've told them it's practically new. And they said unless I have the top mattress, which I needed that because my Brooks spring, my box spring I didn't need. I got a new one. So I may be able to help you
out. And later on, when we get off the air, I believe we may be able to strike some kind of arrangement with each other.
What you got?
It might be of no interest to you, but anyway, no, I'm seriously in all good conscience.
Hold on just a second, sir. Sir, listen, I'm talking to Jim Cornette on his radio show. I'm going to take off and drive off. He's got a line here. I'm talking to Jim Cornette, the manager. Yeah, that same one that called my mom all kinds of names. See, the thing of it is, when I walk around the streets of Chillicothe, people seem to remember the days of WCW. They're stuck in a time warp. Nothing against them, but the days when you called my mom a barnacle barf bag and all kinds. You remember that?
I did not call her a barnacle barf bag. I said that she was an old barnacle-encrusted barf bag.
That's it. Yes. Exactly. Barnacle-encrusted barf bag. But that has seemed to stick. As a matter of fact,
well, they do your mother.
I'm going to go, but I got time. Go ahead, Jimmy. I'm sorry. I've left. I'm in the car. I'm going. It shouldn't sound like I'm in an airplane hangar.
Drive away from the Goodwill.
I did.
All right.
He's motioning me like he's directing traffic, like I've done something wrong.
He wouldn't be using that finger.
Ahead. I'm sorry.
He wouldn't be using that same finger if he was directing traffic.
No. Yeah, not the middle finger.
I've lost complete control. On Saturday, May 26th at the Fairgrounds Coliseum in Circleville, you are having your last match, and I've got to say, you have kept your enthusiasm for wrestling long, because you and me are almost the same age, but you started when you were like an embryo. We'll talk about that in a second, but you have kept your enthusiasm for wrestling long past the point that I did, because when we were both young, our heads, if as Dundee said one time about Terry Taylor, if you'd have cracked his head open, little pussies would have fallen out. If you'd have cracked our heads open, old wrestling programs would have fallen out. But you've kept you just wrestled 7 times in 2 days at the Strawberry Festival down in Charlotte.
In Fort Mill, as a matter of fact, I was down there, and like I said, twice on Friday and 5 times on Saturday. And I told him it was like being at a buffet bar. Give me some more. I'm trying to get all I can because, like you said, May 26th is it, Jimmy. May 26th is it for me, and I'm tickled to death that you said you would come out of the castle and come up here, because you know what? It's really a special time for me. We got you coming. We got Flying Fred Curry, some of the guys around here, a lot of other stars, as you talked about, people, Superstar Bill Dundee, people that along the way either gave me a helping hand or a kick in the seat, or like beautiful Bobby Eaton about killed me with them chairs. So, I mean, we got him coming too. And I mean, I'm just excited about what's taking place in Circleville, Ohio. Great big world classic professional big time wrestling. It's my final match, and I'm excited, Jimmy, that you're going to be there. The only thing I'm disappointed in, that it's not against you. I'd like to see you superplex me one more time.
No. We've told a story before. I executed the only superplex in history off the bottom rope at your insistence one night when you wouldn't let me go. But
that's right. That's right.
I'm my record against you in Circleville is 0 for life, and we're going to keep it that way. I'm not adding any more to the other category.
I got you.
But I will be there because I want to see it in person, actually, because people have talked about you having your last match, but I want to be there to witness it and make sure, sort of like when they put the stake in Count Dracula. I want to make sure that they hammered it in an extra time just to make sure he's dead.
I hear you. You know, my opponent is going to be for that night, Nick Curry, going back to the days when I wrestled Flying Fred when I was in Wild Bull Curry when I was 16 and 17 years old. It's kind of my way of giving back to a certain extent, to reach back and give a helping hand to a guy that's a national champion as far as grappling and just a college great wrestler and this and that. Course comes from the Curry line of professional wrestling from Wild Bull Curry, Flying Fred Curry, and of course Nick Curry. I'm excited about the match. I'm excited, Jimmy, that you're going to be there. Not only that, so many other big stars. We got Abyss and the Barbarian. They're going to be in a what is that match called, Dylan? Monsters Ball match. Sorry, Jimmy, I had a Monsters Balls match. We also got Shane Douglas going to be there against the Pitbull in ECW's Unfinished Business type match. We've got Superstar Bill Dundee's going to be in a 6-man tag leading one team. Kevin Sullivan's going to be on the other team leading that team. We've got all kinds of great wrestling action. Like you said, 5MW is going to be taking on the FBI, the full-blooded Italians, with the Big Don, Wildfire, Tommy Rich, and Tracy Smothers. And it's going to be a big night in Circleville. You know, Jimmy, and tell Brian, there's an atmosphere, there's an aura there in that building. And as a matter of fact, this will be the last ever wrestling event in that building because they're going to tear it down. Yes, they're tearing it down. And it is the magical atmosphere. Tell Brian that it's unbelievable when you walk in there. It's like stepping back in time for professional wrestling and everything.
I feel like Lance. Tell these fans exactly. No, in all honesty, that building has been there since what, the 40s? Buddy Rogers wrestled.
You got the
there.
program, remember?
Yeah.
I think you got the very first program of a show that was there because it was in 49. I think was their first show, and then I gave you that program, remember, and everything. But Buddy
Rogers wrestled there. Al Haft ran that building as a promoter, you know, and they had all the great, you know, all the great Midwest wrestling stars over the years have wrestled. Carl Gotch has been in that building, for heaven's sake.
Handsome Johnny Barron, Magnificent Maurice, Mr. Clean, Ernie Roth was in that building. I mean,
and as a matter of fact, from the state of the bathrooms and the locker rooms, I think part of them is still there. That's what led to some of the charm of the play. But it has a great atmosphere for wrestling.
Yes, it does, and it's magical. And like I said, the fans are just some of the greatest fans in the world, and everything. And you know, this is the first time ever we're doing a fan fest during the day, from 9 until 3. And this way, Jimmy, not only that, they get a chance to talk to us where. At a wrestling show, you always got that big line of people buying your books and everything and your jackets and this and that. And
restraining orders.
This way during the Fan Fest. And yeah, that's right, everything. But this way they get a chance. Plus, we're doing something a little bit different. We're going to take 10 fans at a time down into the locker rooms. And we're going to tell locker room stories from the locker rooms, kind of something that they never got a chance to hear or see some of the stuff that went on, you know.
I'll tell you what, that's a money-making opportunity also, because I've been in those locker rooms. I guarantee you they'll pay you double just for you to let them out. But make sure to mention the live. Now, make sure to mention the live Jim Cornette Experience, because I can't get up there before 3:00 for the Fan Fest. All the other superstars will handle that. Fine. Well, listen, I know you know. I'm telling the people, but I'm saying,
I know.
After the Fan Fest, what time does the Experience start? Where I interview all those various.
It starts from 6 until 7.
Okay.
From 6 until 7. And we got the PA systems finally fixed. Isn't that funny? They're going to tear the building down once we get the acoustics right in the building. I said, isn't that something? We finally got it now to where it don't sound like you're going, you know.
Well, maybe
we got it right.
Once they finally figured out what we were all saying, they said, fuck, we got to close this building down.
Yeah, man, this is condemned. But you know, it's a beautiful old building. It's just like Cincinnati Gardens is gone, Dayton Hare Arena is gone. All these major arenas that they had in Ohio and things are tearing these buildings down, and it's another one that's going to be sad to see it go. And you know, Jimmy, it's like you said earlier, I still have the same enthusiasm as I had when my dad started down Route 50 towards Clarksburg, West Virginia for my first match. I still have the same enthusiasm at 57 years old. If I would have stayed in the business another month, it would have been 41 years I would have had my first match. So it'll be 40 plus about 7-8 months. But I'm so excited about this, and I'm glad that you people don't realize that I had to pry you out of Castle Cornette to come, because this is something that you're not doing a lot of. But I asked you, and you said, Bobby, I would be more than tickled to death to come up there and witness your last match. And you said you were going to make sure by hook or by crook it was my last match. I don't know what that means as a
Well,
friend.
I'm just there's no reason to air any dirty laundry in public. But no, you mentioned your first match. What was it's in Clarksburg, and you're 16 years old. Tell what was
16.
What was that like?
Well, I'll tell you what, I had no prior training really. I had wrote a letter and this and that, and they invited me to come down. So I'm on my way down, and my dad had went to school shortly for a little bit with Ray Stevens. Ray Stevens lived in Chillicothe for a while. So, and then Leon Graham and some of the other guys that were from Chillicothe wrestled for El Half. And on the way down there, I'm riding down with Dad. I said, Dad, if this stuff ain't on the up and up, because I used to like to fight people for some reason sometimes. I said, I'm not staying in. He said, son, if it ain't, there's more reason to stay in. He said, your longevity will last longer. But my mom, meanwhile, saying, Jim, that's my dad's name, Jim, you can't let that boy wrestle. And he said, Nance, it's a phase he's going through. Let's let him wrestle a couple times. He'll be done with it, and that'll be it. So my dad drove me down to Clarksburg. I got down there, and at first they wasn't going to let me wrestle. I think they had 9 guys. They had a 10-man battle royal book. And the guy with the ring said, I can't let you wrestle. You're only 16. I said, yeah, but I'll soon be 17. You know, that was my thing. And I had got a Carl and Hildegard book, so I had boots and trunks. I didn't have tennis shoes. I didn't have shorts. I even had one of those blue satin boleros with the black lapel, with the sleeveless.
I think you were still that when you came to Memphis.
That's right.
Yes.
And I became Bobby Fulton. I got down there. I wrestled my first match. Me and that guy about beat each other half to death. It was Joseph Shedlock, who did a wrestling report out of Greensburg, Pennsylvania, if you remember, back in the day when he had his thing. He was Mad Dog Michaels, and we went out and wrestled for about 5 minutes. It seemed like 20. And the match, I don't know what the plan was, but the locker room's emptied, and they pulled us apart. And Hank Hudson, they thought we was going to kill each other. Hank Hudson said, even to this day, he said, Bobby, that was one of the best matches on the car. He said, it looked so real. I said, because, Hank, it was real. I was rope burned. Listen, I was rope burned from the top of my head down, mat burned, because a lot of people don't realize it, Jimmy. When you're not used to moving on that mat, you get mat burns. That's why guys a lot of times wear knee pads.
Yeah.
Yes, like sandpaper. And then the ropes, if they're just rope with tape, then you got rope burns and all kinds of stuff. So I was burnt from head to toe. And listen, I was so excited when they gave me my payoff. I got $5. I signed 3 autographs, and I was on top of the world. I couldn't believe it. And I said to them, my dad was hoping, standing over there. My dad supported me, and he was there. Just like your mother supported you. I'll never forget making the trips with you. But here's what happened. I said, can I wrestle again the next time? They had the next match, I think in July and in August and this and that. And I'm sure my dad said, okay, I'll bring you back. So it was like 175 miles down to Clarksburg from Chillicothe, 175 miles back, and I got $5 whole for wrestling my first match and loved it.
Oh, And from the peanut gallery comes what now?
Dylan said, but that's not like $5 today.
No, not $5. Well, that was 78, 77?
77.
So that $5, that would be the equivalent of almost $18 today. So
I couldn't even hardly buy a Golden Corral.
Actually, I'll have you know that I know for a fact that the price of a Wendy's triple combo in 1982 was $4.25.
So there you go. I could only get one piece of meat.
You're the first person I remember telling me that you were going to have a great dinner. You were going to have Job Boy steak. I said, what? Job Boy steak? What's that? It's bologna. Oh.
Yep. You had to enjoy those days. Well, you remember, you told me what Frank Morrell told you. And as a matter of fact, Dylan had the same thing to happen. He wears a hat out as a manager and this and that. And he said, it's 100 degrees out here. And they told him, wear your stuff anyway. And I told Dylan, I'll never forget Jim Cornette down in Georgia. Yep. What happened, Jimmy?
It was 172 degrees in like the Carrollton National Guard Armory or some shit place. And I was looking at that suit jacket and going, oh, I ain't going to put that jacket on. And Frank Morrell looked at me and said, if it's too hot to wear your gimmick, it's too hot to work. Yes, sir. And then he also, another piece of wisdom that Daddy Frank passed down that summer was when they had us going to, I don't know, Bainbridge, Georgia, some way down in South Georgia, 4 or 5 hours. And we knew there was going to be, back then, 200 people was an embarrassing crowd. So we knew that's what was going to be there. And I'm like, oh, gosh, it's $65. He said, boy, did you ever see $65 worth of ham and eggs on a plate?
I told Dylan that the other day.
Would be impressive. Oh.
Do what now?
I said it would be impressive, I'm sure, a sight, but it registered.
Sure.
The point, we were paying dues, but who was the first person, the first legitimate promotion? If you ever worked for a legitimate promotion, who was the first one that you worked for? Because you spent a couple of years.
Here's the thing. Doing the independents. I got to thinking that it was all like that. I thought, there ain't no offices. There ain't nothing. I'd worked a couple of shows at Dayton Hair Arena. I was called by mistake. Les Ruffin called me and said, Jim, and that's my real name, right? I said, yeah. He said, can you make Dayton Hair Arena tonight? I was like 16 years old, right? And he said, I said, yeah, I can make it. He said, now, can you make Cincinnati the next week? I said, no, I got to go to a wedding. So all of a sudden, I go to the show. Now, this is what happens. The Sheik and Bobo Brazil were there, and a young guy by the name of Randy Savage, just became the Macho Man, which actually, if you ask Hank Hudson, I was the very first Macho Man in wrestling, but that's another day. But I wrestled Al Costello for 30 minutes at Dayton Hair Arena. Then I came back in a tag match and wrestled 20 minutes. It was me and Randy Savage against Al Costello and Bobby Bold Eagle, and Randy Savage never tagged. He never got in the match. So I wrestled 50 minutes. And finally, when I get beat, he comes in the ring and beats me up and leaves me laying there. So out of the card, it's 50 minutes I've wrestled at Dayton Hair Arena, right? Why hurry up and go back and get a shower so I can watch the Sheik and I think Bobo Brazil wrestle? And I went and got my shower and I came running out and they were leaving the ring. So the funny thing of it was, Jimmy, Les Ruffin comes up to me, right? He said, is there any way you can make Cincinnati next week? I said, no, I got to go to a wedding. He said, that's a funny thing. Jim Grabmeyer's going to a wedding too that same day.
He had called him thinking it was you.
He had
called you thinking it was him.
Jim Grabmeyer. Huh? He had called the wrong number. I don't even know how he got my phone number. But now that was like, the first whatever in a major arena. But then my first promoter that actually had an office, I drove down to Nick Gouldis's territory from Dale Mann, and Nick was in an office there on Franklin Road, I think. And me and Eric Embry walked in there, and I've told this story 100 times. I'm going to tell you again. Just goes to tell you, nowadays when they have wrestling schools, the first thing they do is teach the guys. They open up a piece of paper and start teaching you the words. Then they teach you how to hit the ropes, nothing to do really with the wrestling part, but in that 2-finger handshake. But I got in there with Eric Embry, Brian, and Jimmy, listen to this, and I'm looking at the world famous Nick Goulas because I've been reading these slamograms from Scott Till I've been getting in the mail. And I'm sitting there looking at Nick Goulas, and he's stepping in, he's dressed in that suit, looks like $1 million. He said, "You two boys are what we call jabronis." And I elbowed Eric. I thought, man, we're in now, brother. We have got it made. He said, you call yourself Bob Fulton, and he's Don Stahl, but Tennessee loves Bravo tag teams. He said, "I'll tell you what I'm going to do." He said, "I'm going to make you Bob and Don Fulton, the Fulton brothers." He said, and I'm going to buy you some outfits. And we bought them outfits. He ordered them outfits, and all of a sudden we got them. And Tojo came that night. We got our checks. He said, you owe Nick $10. You owe Nick $10. So we didn't even have enough in our check to cover our outfits. Nick needed another $10.
Oh my God.
So we could get to the town. So that was my first major territory. If Nick was and he was the deal back then. Think about it. I mean,
yeah.
You know, for Tennessee.
And especially because at that point, when Jarrett had already split off, Nick was open because he didn't get a lot of support from anybody but the Sheik as far as talent.
That's right. Sheik
so
was coming in. You're right.
He was open to using guys that let's say weren't proven, just to see what the fuck. Right. Because if he didn't like them, he could just starve them and they'd leave.
What the funny thing of it was, I'll never forget when I came back and wrestled for Jerry Jarrett, some of the old Nick Goulas fans would come up to me and said, "You know, we still love wrestling." Said, "But we have the same old guys stay forever." And I said, "Yeah, they're getting paid here for Jerry Jarrett." Nick Goulas, there was a constant turnover of guys, you know, speaking about that, Jimmy. Guys would come in, they'd wrestle for about 2 or 3 weeks, about starved to death. There's a lot of people you say they'd come in driving in a $3,000 car and ride out on a $400,000 Bluebird, the Greyhound bus. They had to sell their car just to get to the. Do you remember those days, Jimmy?
Yeah, but well, as a matter of fact, didn't you leave one of your cars just on the side of the interstate between Louisville and Evansville because it wasn't worth coming back? Yeah. I'll never forget after I'd got my arm broke in a riot in Kentucky, and Cuban Assassin was wrestling there, and I'd wrestled with him in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. But I talked to him, and he got me in there to Jarrett's. Well, when I went in there, I'd loaned my car to some guys, but prior to that, and they had ran in my car. Somebody woke me up one morning and said, "Your car's down there in Salina, Tennessee, in the lake." So I had to go get it out and knock the gas tank off. So I had a 5-gallon, big, like a cooler, in the back of my station wagon with a tube running down in that cooler, running down under the car, back up in. And so when you rode in the car, there was gas fumes. Wait, was that factory installed? Because that doesn't sound safe to me. I don't.
Yeah, Jimmy, and the heater was stuck on high. So when I got to the Louisville Gardens, I'd always take my right shoe off. And Frank Morrell would look down, and that thing was blood red where that heater had been on it the whole time. My eyes was red because of some gas fumes. And you could smell the gasoline still on me because, you know, I had to get to the town. And then one day, Jimmy, I just got out and didn't get back in. That car's probably sitting somewhere on one of them exits around Horse Cave or something. I don't know.
Oh my God! But I don't want people to think that you remained a starving artist, because one of the things I said we haven't talked about before on the show, and we got to talk about is that was like in Memphis. That was like 81-ish, 82-ish. But by another 3 or 4 or 5 years, you and Tommy Rogers, as the Fantastics, you were working Mid-South, you were working Tennessee, but also you started working Japan. For All Japan, for Giant Baba, and you know everybody knows Mrs. Baba just passed away, and that's sort of like an end of an era over there. But at least you guys were making. And I've talked about this before. The guys that were going to work for Baba in the '80s were a lot of times were making more money than any territory per week than any territory would pay over here. Now, you went over and back, but tell me, how did you first get booked over there? How did you get started?
Well, what happened was, you remember Tokyo Joe Diego?
Yeah.
You remember that name? The guy that had the one leg. He would come to Crockett shows, and I talked to him. He said, "You guys are on Baba's list. I can't even talk to you." I said, "What?" He said, "You never come to New Japan. Baba's already picked you guys." I said, "But we've never been to Japan. We're interested in going." He said, "But you don't understand. Do you remember when they had the big war when Brody and them, they were in mid-tour, and Stan Hansen and Abdullah and them, they were jumping and Jimmy Snook and them, they were jumping
Yes.
from office back and forth to office." Well, then they finally had an agreement, and apparently what they did was, in this agreement, they even picked people before they even came.
Just the guys working the territories in America, they say, "Okay, you can have this one, and I'll take that."
Yes, they picked who they wanted eventually, and apparently because that Tokyo Joe told me, he said, "You're on Giant Baba's," and they knew the list, and he said, "You're on Giant Baba's list." So what happened when me and Tommy finished up with WCW during George Scott's infamous reign? I called Lord Blears, Tally Ho Blears, and I talked to him. I said, "We'd love to go." He said, "They'd love to have you," and he said, "It's going to be great." And I guess he knew we were on that list, and we got booked straight away over there. And like you said, the money was good. I think we went for a month at a time. And the guys that went for Baba, because Inoki did shorter tours in those days, but the guys that went for Baba would go over for like 4 weeks at a time, and they'd do the whole tour for a month, and then you come back and they'd take a couple weeks off, and they'd start a new tour with other guys. Yes, and the funny thing of it was even before that, like that IWEA that was over there, they would have 7 and 8 weeks. That would be tough, but yeah, we would go over there for a month at a time and wrestle. And we got a chance to wrestle the British Bulldogs, Dynamite Kid, who I'd met first in Calgary, and I thought he was one of the greatest. As a matter of fact, Jimmy, after I'd left Calgary and came to Jarrett's, you showed me the matches. I'd never seen him of Tiger Masking him. Remember, you had him on the beta or whatever, and I was watching them there. But Dynamite Kid and Davey Boy Smith, and of course the Malenkos, Joe and Dean Malenko, and they had a lot of great talent in Japan, and the work rate was a lot different. I mean, there was no clapping or this or that or whatever. It was just a different style totally. And
I always remember that Bobby and Stan, whenever you guys came back from Japan, Bobby and Stan would cower in the corner and go, "Jesus Christ, would y'all slow down? You're not Japan anymore." Grab a hold.
Yeah, it was yeah, it's a different style. It was a different style and everything, and I always loved going, of course, because of all that we had heard about it and everything. And Giant Baba was a great. I got a chance. I consider Paul Bosch one of the greats as far as promoters, and Giant Baba as well. His word was his bond as far as I'm concerned. Other people might say different things. And I'll never forget one time I'd cut my hair off dark, and I went with dark hair for some stupid reason. And I was getting off the plane or getting to the arena, and he would watch. He said, "Is that the original Bobby Fulton?" He said, "That's not the original, is it?" He thought somebody had shifted. So they sprayed my hair, Jimmy, and sprayed my hair and tried to turn it because my hair is so hard to turn. They turned it green for photos. And I said, they never used them. One picture, though, I look like a green-haired, the way I'm posed and this and that, and the light blue trunks.
It could have been an Irish
gimmick. I look like Bruno Sammartino.
It could have been an Irish gimmick.
Yeah, I should have done that. Anyway, I could have went and got the top hat and this and that. But in Japan, we had a lot of great matches, but also that was the place where Tommy Rogers had Danny Spivey do a dive over the top rope, and Tommy put his knees up, and Tommy at 195, Danny at 325. Danny 6'7", his legs caught the top rope, so all of his weight came down on Tommy's knees. And when it did, it ripped the muscle stomach lining inside and hurt him. then Tommy was in the ring working out, and he went to do a gainer into the ring before the crowd got in. He wanted to see if he could do it.
Oh, no.
And he burned his face up on the mat. And then he went to do it again, and he was staggering around. I said, man, don't do that again. And the office came running out. Ricky Dozan's son, Ricky Momoda, we called him, came running out. No. But it was too late. Tommy had already broke his neck, which he continued on the tour with a broken neck. And his face was all burnt from hitting that canvas, like he did, and this and that. And it just seemed like then at that point that, there's a lot when you're wrestling at that pace, there's a lot more injuries and a lot of things. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, and also he pulled a Jericho. He hurt his own self in an empty ring too. But
yes. Now I didn't know about Jericho doing that.
You weren't there that night in Knoxville. Jericho goes out before him and Storm are going to wrestle the Heavenly Bodies. Jericho goes out that afternoon to practice the Shooting Star Press and breaks his arm.
Oh no!
Comes back and works the match with an inflatable cast on, and then has surgery. And he's that was his Smoky Mountain career. Boom!
Wow! I never knew that.
But hey, here's the thing, though. You guys were over there for years, on and off, from like the late '80s through mid '90s. How many actual different tours did? Because like Hanson. When I did the interview with him, it was 100 and something or whatever times he's been over there. But how many trips did you guys make? Because I know you were back. Actually,
we had went totally about 17 times. That's what we had ended up doing then, because I think we missed a couple of years in the middle somehow. But and I think it was 17. I think totally that we did, and each time we went was a month. So. It was great, and like I said, the work
money back then also, because you guys, a lot of weeks, you would go over there, you'd make more money than we were making at our days for Crockett.
Sure.
Sure. I think you guys got up $5-6 grand a week apiece, did you not?
Yes, sir.
And because they rewarded loyalty, when you kept going back, you kept getting raises. Right,
and they were, like I said, they treated you really good. They, as long as you did your job, they that's what they wanted, and to go out and work hard. And then eventually I started training some of the younger Japanese guys. So when I would go, I would get in the ring and teach the young guys. And Baba would have me ask me, would you please go to the ring and work out with the young guys and teach them? And we would teach them the style, the kind of like the American type style. I mean, wrestling though, you know what I'm saying.
Well, because Baba always his promotion was more Americanized, because I think wasn't that the root of a lot of the heat? And Noki never got over in the States, whereas Baba did. They pushed him right, and he was a star, and Noki was kind of blah. So Noki went more with the European and Calgary style, and Baba went more with like guys like the Funks that worked the classic American style.
Right. Well, as a matter of fact, they both came out of the dojo at the same time, I think. Yeah. So there was always a rivalry there. So when Ricky Dozan, Japan Wrestling, when Ricky Dozan got killed, they both started companies, I believe, then. And I think the Destroyer went with Baba, if I'm not mistaken. He got some of the stars that were established. And then there was that war we talked about earlier where they were just like, they would be in the middle of a tour for Giant Baba, and the next day they would be working for New Japan, and vice versa.
Brody and I forget the first jump, and Brian, I know you can probably do this from heart, but basically involved in it were guys like Brody and Abdullah, and in Hanson, and later on the Road Warriors, where those guys got up to $10,000-$15,000 a week and more, and jumping bonuses and signing bonuses, and we're talking 30 years ago. So this was,
that's right.
Here's another thing. Do you watch much of Japanese wrestling today? Do you watch the New Japan show on Access? They've Americanized even the Japanese product now.
Yep, and as a matter of fact, I met the one guy in New Orleans that has his hair shaved. It's like the champion. And I didn't. Do you know who I'm talking about? Dylan, what's his name?
Help us, Brian.
That guy.
The head shave. You're not talking about Minoru Suzuki, are you?
Minoru Suzuki. And I met him, And when they told him because I don't have the blonde hair and I'm older, when they told him who I was, he got a picture taken with me. He used to sneak into the matches. He used to sneak in, and I mean sneak, not pay. He would sneak into the matches to watch us wrestle.
Oh, as a matter of fact, he was on the show that I was on in England year before last. And and they almost lost him at the train station. That could have been ugly. But as far as the current product, do you watch much? Because really, New Japan is the same. Well, I figured that, but New Japan is the last vestige of the glory days. But even then, they've Americanized everything so much, because when business was huge in Japan in the 80s and 90s. They treated it even more seriously than they treated it in America. And there were finishes, and there was logic, and there wasn't run-ins and hoo-ha and stuff behind the referee's back. And it seemed like that was a great place to see these dream matches with the top talent, and you didn't have to go through all the falderall. But now it's kind of the same thing as they do here.
Right. Well, back then, just real quick, digressing for a second, when we got over there, we would throw a guy back in the ring and the people would pop big, because see, they were used to having countouts prior to the 80s.
Yeah, that's right.
A lot of non-finished matches. So as soon as you went to the floor, they figured, here it goes. But then you threw the guy in, they knew, hey, it's going to continue, so they would pop. And
they went the opposite.
Baba was giving them.
They went in the opposite direction of America, whereas they did for years countouts and hokey finishes, so they wouldn't have to beat any of their stars because they were guest stars all the time. But then Baba realized that was bad and went to all clean finishes. And for the rest of the time, All Japan was in business, they did winners and losers, and it led to their best business. And America's gone in the opposite direction.
That's the only way to build your business. This is for promoters and people, winners and losers. You have to have winners and you have to have losers. And that's just it. Like you said, and one of the things that helped Baba in the 80s was this. Tenyu, one of his stars, went opposition and took all the young Japanese guys with him, except for about 6 Japanese guys. Misawa stayed, Kawada stayed, Sensafuki had went. I'm trying to think. And what happened was he started having to bring 20 Americans over. Because I remember being on one of those first tours when that happened, the Japanese people was counting us, and it just popped it even more, and it was drawing big time because Baba was bringing in all these American guys. You know, I mean, granted, and the one thing
it was hard to sustain. It was hard to keep up.
Yeah, it was hard to sustain because the Japanese people, they wanted to see Japanese wrestle American guys. It's just like what would happen here. They wanted to hope that the Japanese guys would end up beating the American guys and everything. And like you said, it just didn't sustain. But going back to Inoki and talking about him fighting that more MMA style, he's really the father of MMA. Because when Ivan Koloff, when you started Smoky Mountain Wrestling, and me and Ivan had that school over there in Indian Trails, we were training guys, and they were going over fighting in the first MMA fights for Inoki and them. I don't know if I ever told you that or not.
Yeah, no, I remember a couple of the guys because I ended up using a couple of guys for TV that I think that you had, but
yeah, you did.
And that was the thing that Inoki had tried to, and now everybody talks about it as the birth of mixed martial arts, the match with Ali, but he had always, after that was the most high profile, and it stunk. But then what he did to redeem himself in Japan was he brought in all those other guys that would work with him, like Everett Eddie, the kickboxer, the karate guy, and all had all those different mixed matches, and kind of after the fact, at least in Japan, established the idea that he was the badass because he could beat all these fighters from other disciplines. So that actually worked for him in the long run. But boy, it took a fucking while.
Sure it did, to establish it and this and that and everything. You're exactly right. And
but that was why the Japanese people they loved the wrestling heroes, because they could believe in them. The Americans were these crazy badasses, and their natives were the toughest in the world. And I hate to see that now, because it's the same thing in Japan as it is in America with the money. Also, we talked about if the top guys, Baba and Inoki, were both running full-time companies and bringing in Americans.
Right.
And Baba, we know, could afford to pay his, because we've talked to him. And they were telling us at the time, afford to pay his top Americans $10 grand, $12 grand, $15 grand a week, and still run his company, and they were making money hand over fist. And I wonder if anybody's going over and making, except Jericho, is making that, what would it be now, 40 grand a week or 35 grand a week?
Sure.
You know, at this point,
it's
the
amazing.
money's gone down when they've devalued the idea of the star power and the credibility of their top guys. Now everybody can be on the show, and there's fewer talents to choose from.
And not only that, listen to this, Jimmy. There are guys now buying their own plane tickets to get to Japan just to wrestle there.
I talked to somebody that one time, it may have been the OVW guys. I think I told somebody this story recently, may have been on a program. But a couple of the guys, this was like 6-7 years ago somewhere, said, we're going to Australia. Right. I said, well, who booked you in Australia? So-and-so, I'd never heard the name. And I said, well, said, good money, go all the way to Australia? Well, we're going to wrestle every night, and we're getting $700 a week, but we get to see Australia. I'm like, fuck. Okay.
I hear you. That's the bad thing about it. You know, going back to what they're calling this Japanese wrestling strong style, right?
Yes.
Well, now it's the same thing that Jimmy, that the Midnight Express and the Fantastics did night after night, and all of us on the card. It's the same stuff. And what I mean by that is, some things might look like it. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But Lord Blears told me when he first started going to Japan way back in the 40s, he said that they would be on a train, they'd get off. Half the crew had broken legs and broken arms. I'm talking about Japanese guys. So they would be getting ready to go to the next town. Another train would come and bring more Japanese wrestlers. So the guys not the top guys, but the guys on the bottom, all the way mid-card, was shooting.
when the
top guys and the American guys would be working.
When they first brought Brian, help me out. Who was the first tour? The Sharp brothers were on the first tour, right? But do you know the promoter's name? I used to, Ben and Mike Sharp. But I used to know who was the promoter that first. Was it Bobby Bruns?
I was going to say Bobby Bruns, but I'm not sure. The fact that you're questioning it makes me question it. But it was definitely the Sharp brothers.
Yeah, and it was the early 50s, and they took American pro wrestling over there, and they like you said, they had locals that I guess they didn't smarten up, because they just took a few top Americans to tour, and then that's when they found Ricky Dozan, and they said, we have a gold mine, because in the Pfeffer collection, the Jack Pfeffer papers, I think is a letter that I've seen from Bobby Bruns that said something to the effect of, wrestling in Japan can be a gold mine if we can find a Japanese star, something of that nature.
That's right.
And that's how they ended up doing it. But they're sending those guys out there to just beat the shit out of each other, because nobody's ever seen this shit before, and they don't know what they're doing anyway.
Right.
Oh, it's fucking great.
And then the top guys are working.
And, well, that's almost the way that's almost the way it's turned out 70 years later, or whatever, these days.
Yeah.
But, you know, let me ask you, I had a fight on Twitter with some of the folks here this morning earlier. Does it just hurt your heart when you see the fans going, well, why would anyone take this seriously? Wrestling's supposed to be silly and fun and entertain people, and just have that cavalier attitude out of it. And the thing was the intergender matches. I actually drew money with an intergender match with me and Baby Doll back in the day.
Sure.
Or whatever the fuck.
Sure.
That's not what people don't understand. And maybe you can help me, or just tell me if this hurts you as much as I do. You can have the fucking unathletic manager against the big valet, or even the small valet, but the big one's even better.
Right.
Or you can have a woman against a referee or whatever. But when you're talking people that are presented as trained professional athletes, whether they be women or men wrestlers. You can't have women and men have competitive matches where they're working spots with each other and they look as good because somebody said on Twitter, well, that just shows that the women can perform as good as the men. And I said, exactly. That's what you don't want to do because it's a performance you are demonstrating that. You do not want to demonstrate this shit is a performance. Therefore, the last thing you want is a competitive match between a man and a woman. And yes, Ronda Rousey can whip the guy at Jiffy Lube, but I've said that qualified it, trained professional wrestlers. It makes the business look like pure hoo-ha.
Sure. And it's just like, for example, a guy about a year ago was a referee, and everybody knew him as a referee. And he said, Bobby, I want to wrestle you in a match. I said, you're going to wrestle me in a match? And we went out to the ring, and I ate him up. And I told him, I said, listen, you're not a good wrestler. You're a decent referee, and you're not a good promoter either. I said, I can't believe that you would try to do this stuff and try to get out here and wrestle them things. You're exactly right. There's two different levels, Jimmy, and you're right about the manager, perhaps, and the woman. But just to go out there like that, it doesn't make sense to me at all, and I don't understand why they do it.
And they do it because they do it. They do it because they can. They do it because they think it's fun, and to appease the niche audience that they've got these days. They do these things because that's what, for the kind of people that like that kind of thing, that's the kind of thing those people like. But they don't understand how to a broader audience, it just continues to make wrestling look silly and stupid. And they can't get it. And people now are saying, oh, but wrestling's hotter than ever. Wrestling's drawing bigger than it. Somebody actually said independent wrestling is drawing more than it was back in the 70s. There was no independent wrestling in the 70s because every territory was turning them away.
That's right. That's right. And see, people don't understand that wrestling. It's just like, for example, wrestling is not better off than it was from as far as its inception on to now, because it's a smaller audience that's watching it, and it just doesn't have the same appeal. And you know what? Every time I see somebody, you know what they tell me, Jimmy? If I'll see them, like if I'll go to a store later on, they'll say, you know, I used to watch the wrestling when you guys wrestled, but I don't like it anymore. I don't even watch it anymore.
Exactly. So that's what you get in any mainstream setting. Whether I'm at a comic book convention, I'll see more people who say, I used to love wrestling when I was a kid, or I watched it when it was real, or whatever the case, before it got silly or fake or whatever. Then I do the actual wrestling. It's only at a wrestling event you meet the current wrestling fans. But it's just, it's frustrating for me to see so many of the fans go, well, look at the boom. Like this is it's better than it was, which is like picking up a turd by the clean end. It's still not as fucking good as it was 30 years ago, because then legitimate arenas were drawing thousands of people per week.
Look here. Memphis. Let's just use that for an example. On Monday night, 10,000 people, right?
Yes.
Go back the next Monday, 10,000. The next Monday, it might be 6 or 7, back up to 10. It might be, but that's thousands and thousands of people coming out paying, and that's not including the people that sit home watching it, which, considering the viewing audience and the more people that watched it, there was more people watching the Memphis wrestling program in a studio than watches the WWE. And what I'm saying is, considered the area that's viewing it. You know what I'm saying? Population.
And the whole thing is where we got we besides the corporate involvement, everybody in wrestling got so cute and thought, oh, we're all superstars, as Bill Watts said one time when he sent out that memo. You know, gentlemen, I know you're all superstars and everybody knows everything, but the problem is, on a mainstream basis, it didn't kill wrestling when people found out that it was a work. It killed wrestling when we stopped trying to convince them it wasn't. because
right.
they kind of knew, a lot of them kind of knew, but nobody admitted it. There was some mystery to the thing. When we stopped trying to make them, that's why they watched TV in record numbers. That's why they came out every week in record numbers, because until they could figure it out, or until somebody proved different, they wanted to believe it. And then we slapped them in the face with it, like our kids, fucking school pictures, until they had to admit, okay, it's all phony, and now we don't give a shit. So there you have it.
Here's the deal. I'll never forget being in World Class the night that Eddie Mansfield got on that TV program. And we figured business was going to die. But business didn't die then.
Well, remember, Ken Mantell said, don't do it more than any three-phase high spots. Keep them to 2 and 3 phase hot spots. And we went out and had our normal match because they couldn't see through our shit anyway.
That's right. But here's the thing, Jimmy. It's just like I tell people today. If I go to a magic show and I see the guy sliding the woman in the back door of the thing or the elephant, and you just have a horrible magic show, I know they still call it a magic show, but it's not really magic. I want to go when he's good at his art, that he's slick, that he suspends my belief and thinking, man, this guy's really good. How did he do that? And it's just like, for example, that's why one of the things I'm going to do when I retire from this, I'm going to try to get guys that's tried to get in, that has wrestling, but I'm going to teach the lost art of professional wrestling. I'm not opening up another wrestling school per se, but what I'm going to do is the people that's in it is try to hone them to get them right. Because Jimmy, you're right. You go to a bad magic show, it's just a bad magic show. You go to a bad wrestling show, it's just a bad wrestling show. But you go to a good wrestling show with good, solid guys, and the people go, wow, man, this is great. You see what I'm saying?
It looks like it's actually something that's difficult to do when people at a high level do it. It looks like something you wouldn't want to try at home, folks, because this shit's dangerous. But here's the thing. What about if all the amateur musicians and the amateur magicians, if everybody in the world was entitled to, there was no NWA of magicians, and everybody in the world could be a magician. You could just run outlaw magic shows all over the place, and anybody, regardless of talent or appearance, could be a magician. And all those magicians got together and said, you know what, we're not good enough to be on the big shows because we can't really make the elephant disappear in the Statue of Liberty, but we can fuck up our tricks and have fun, and we'll just let people watch that. And in the process of watching that, they will learn, because we're so bad at it, how all the top stars do all of their tricks because our shit's see-through. And that's what if that happened to the magic business, there wouldn't be any more magicians left. But it's happened to wrestling.
Here's the deal. I love magic, and I always wanted to be a magician when I was little. And I'll never forget, for Christmas, my mom and dad gave me a box of magic tricks. I think 101. I don't know if you remember when we were little, they'd sell them magic trick boxes.
Yes. Oh, as a matter of fact, I have one sitting in my office. If I had my glasses on, I
got so excited.
I could read the magician's name.
I got you. I got so excited, Jimmy, that I opened the box up and I told my brother George, Jackie, let me show you my tricks, and I couldn't do them for nothing. And it messed up, and it's the perfect analogy of what you said. Here, I didn't even hardly open the box up, and I thought I was a magician. And I called myself a magician, maybe Jiminy Crickets, the magician. I don't know what I called myself, but here's the deal. I was trying to do a magic show, and I just opened up the box, didn't read the instructions, and my brother was my only customer. Well, he wasn't a customer, it was free, and he got up and walked off. You know what I mean?
He got mad and made you pay him back, and the tickets were free.
Yeah. He said, Jimmy, he said, I can see everything. He said, it don't even look good. He said, you don't even know what you're doing. I had a little rope in a bottle, and I couldn't make the rope stay in because
that fucking thing. Yes. I remember that. I could never do that either. And those goddamn rings.
And then I had a can that you were supposed to put water in, and it had a little hidden lip on it. When you turned it the other way, it didn't come out. But for some reason, I'd put salt in it, and I poured it all in my hair. I didn't turn it the right way. because I didn't want to put water in it. I put salt in it. And all of a sudden, my brother said you could see the salt come off and down into your head and this and that. So, I mean, it's the same thing, Jimmy. It's the same thing as today's wrestling. It's just another cheap magic show. You know what I'm saying?
Today's wrestling is just like pouring salt on your head. It's a
yeah. There you go. There you go. There you go.
But hey,
it's
your wrestling on May 26th in Circleville will be better, and especially because it's going to be your last match.
Jimmy, I'm going to tell you something right now. I'm going to tell you this. The guy who had us down in the Strawberry Festival, Chad Adams, who I want you to come to. He wants you to come so bad, and I gave him your number. So if you're getting a call from South Carolina, take it. He wants you to come to the event next year. He's begging for Jim Cornette. Now here's the deal. I got out there and I wrestled my guts out 7 times, just as hard as I did when I wrestled way back then. And on May the 26th, last time I wrestled, I'm going to wrestle it is going to be as if I never get a chance to do something that I love. And as you said, I've never lost a passion for the business. That's why I try to teach these young guys and tell them this and that. I've never lost the love and the passion for the wrestling business. And on May the 26th, I'm going to give it all. And like the old Toby Keith song is, and I told them people in South Carolina, I'm telling everybody listening on your show. And Jimmy, real quick, I'll never forget the time I handed you one of my flyers, and it said, worth driving over 100 miles to see. And you laughed and laughed. Do you remember that?
Yes, and just that you specified the distance that it was worth right there.
Yeah. Well, this is going to be worth driving 200 miles to see. And I'm going to.
That's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to drive 220 miles to see it.
Yes, you are. And you're going to be ringside. And the one thing of it is, I know you won't be jumping up in the ring or doing anything like that, but I want you to be seated there. I know you're going to be doing the experience, and it's going to be audible. Now, listen, Brian, have you ever knew Jim Cornette not to be audible when he's speaking? The last time we did it, it was like they'd ask Jimmy a question, and he'd go, It was like talking on a fucking fire department megaphone in a middle of a kettle drum. I had put on the thing, and just because Jimmy uses a lot of expletives, that there may be some of Jimmy's language used. Keep that in mind for if you bring the little kids. I don't want you to be offended, but Jimmy used every word. Plus, he made up a few. And a guy came up to me with his kids. He said, I never heard one cuss word Jim Cornette said. I said, because you couldn't understand what he was saying.
But it's going to be different now for your last match and the last match in the building.
Yes.
And like the Fan Fest, which has all kinds of stars, and the people that you named is 9 to 3, and the live experience starts at 6, and then we're going to sign autographs at 7 until bell time.
Yep.
And then I'm going to sit right close and make sure that you retire on schedule.
Right. Hey, and Jimmy, we got the Oklahoma kid's daughter coming, and Leon Graham's daughter coming, bringing some old wrestling memorabilia. J.J. Dillon's going to be at the Fan Fest. Jim Lancaster, Flying Fred Curry, just a bunch of stuff. I want everybody to come out and support. It's going to be a great big night. It's going to be a so long and a farewell as far as my wrestling career. But Jimmy, I'm going to tell you something right now. I'm in the trenches with you when it comes to professional wrestling. I still I'll speak my mind. I'll tell it like it is. And if it don't like it, it'll kill them. It'll kill them dead. And that's just the way it is, because we have a passion for this wrestling business. We want it to be right, not to evolve into something that's not right. And like you said, the analogy of the bad magicians and the bad magician shows and stuff like that, that's what's going on. And it needs to be stopped in wrestling. We need to start a policing of it. And Jimmy, I believe that we should elect you as the general, the captain, the sergeant of arms. And me and you, maybe I'll follow behind you in my Honda, and you drive that big black vehicle.
Well, wait, I
can going to these shows, starting them down.
I can start up Cornette. I can start up Cornette's Militia again. I can get my old combat boots out from Smoky Mountain Wrestling and my 5-star Sergeant General's helmet, and we can go from wrestling show to wrestling show, slapping the spot monkeys and blowing the invisible hand grenades up their own asses.
And one thing Robert Gibson mentioned the other day, he said, Bobby, when we break in the wrestling business in all years, didn't we take showers after we wrestled? I said, yes, we did. He told about the story of Lester Welch. Have you ever heard that happen in Dyersburg?
What?
Well, what happened was the Welches owned them farms, in Dyersburg, Tennessee. And I think Lester Welch was a shooter, and this and that. And they'd worked the fields all day long, but they came to the wrestling matches there in Dyersburg ready to wrestle. Well, back then, every match, they only had 6 guys on the card, and each match was 2 out of 3 falls.
Yeah.
So it was like having 6 or 7 matches actually on the card, But he said Lester Welch was out there wrestling, and that guy was stinking he was wrestling with. Well, in between the falls, remember, Jimmy, they went back to the dressing room.
Yeah,
They took like a couple-minute break, then they would come back. Well, they said that Lester Welch came back from the first fall and took a dump in the toilet. And he reached down and grabbed that turd up, and he slapped it up under his underarm and went out to that ring and grabbed that guy in a headlock and held him in it for about 5 to 10 minutes, letting him know that you're not supposed to smell the way you smell when you get into the ring. You're supposed to be clean. And held that man, and that man tried to get out of that headlock with that turd up under Lester Welch's arm. He had smeared it all over the back of that guy's head, probably ended up being in his mouth, but that guy learned a lesson. So, Jimmy, what we may have to do is we may have to get us a fish bowl and get one of your smoking hot, put it in that fish bowl, and when we take it to the matches that are really bad and smelly, is maybe put one up under your arm. Grab them guys in a headlock or a stranglehold and tell them to get out of our wrestling business. They're not wanted anymore.
Actually, I don't know whether it would work, Bobby, because they're used to stinking the joint out.
Yeah, I know.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to see whether or not that Bobby Fulton comes out for his last match with a turd up under his arm in Circleville,
I won't. We'll be clean. We'll be clean.
No, he's going to be.
It's a good show.
He's wrestling the grandson and the son of a legend, the 3rd generation of the Curry family. And if he's anything like at least Wild Bull, you better, as they used to say, Bobby, have your boots laced up tight, because I will not be there. I will not be there to instruct or to obstruct. I will only be there to instruct. You're on your own. I'm not going to help you.
Now, Jimmy, here's the thing: as a promoter, when you mention something, you got to deliver, and I can't deliver that one part that you just mentioned about having up under my underarm.
Well,
but.
Now, don't spoil the suspense, though.
Yeah, I know, but what'll happen, Jimmy, if I don't deliver, it's like that time that you promised to ride a flying donkey all over the building if you didn't produce something. Then people came, and they said, where's that donkey at?
I lied. Everybody knows I was a heel. Anyway, flying donkeys and turds under the arm or no? Saturday, May 26th in Circleville, Ohio at the Fairgrounds Coliseum, we bid adieu to the career of the fantastic Bobby Fulton, and I will be there, and so will a bunch of other people. Get your tickets early. It's worth driving at least 237 miles for.
Yes,
and
sir. Thank you, Jimmy.
The entire state of Ohio and many parts around. And Bobby, thank you for being on the program today. And Brian, thank you for listening to us as we reminisced about turds and Japanese wrestlers. And for everybody else, it's in parting, besides love, peace, and soul, as usual, we want to wish you a very hearty thank you, fuck you, bye.